Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to Sansad TV. I am Tina Jha, you're watching Perspective. On the show today, we are going to talk about Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Trinidad and Tobago, the first bilateral visit by an Indian Prime Minister since 1999. In a special gesture, emblematic of the close ties between the two countries, the Prime Minister was received at the airport in Port of Spain by Mrs. Kamla Persad-Bissessar, the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, along with members of her cabinet and several other dignitaries. He was accorded a ceremonial guard of honor and welcomed with special cultural performances. A traditional dinner was hosted by Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar for our Prime Minister. Food was served to him on a Sohari leaf, which is of great cultural significance to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, especially those with Indian roots. Prime Minister Modi presented a replica of the Ram Mandir in Ayodhya to Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar during the dinner hosted in his honor. He also offered holy water from the Saryu River and from the Mahakumbh, which was held in Prayagraj. Prime Minister Modi also addressed a large gathering of the Indian Diaspora in Trinidad and Tobago, underlining that his historic visit to the country comes at a time when the nation is celebrating 180 years of the first arrival of Indian immigrants on its shores, made it even more special. He also praised the Indian diaspora for their resilience, cultural richness, and their immense contribution to Trinidad and Tobago. He also underscored that the Government of India would be supporting several initiatives to nurture the Girmitiya legacy. Listen in.
The Indian diaspora is our pride, and I have often said, each one of you is a Rashtradoot, an ambassador of India's values, culture and heritage. We are actively working on creating a comprehensive database of the Girmitiya community, documenting the villages and cities in India from which their ancestors migrated. Identifying the places where they have settled, studying and preserving the legacy of the Girmitiya ancestors, and working to organize World Girmitiya conferences regularly. This will support the deep and historic ties with our brothers and sisters in Trinidad and Tobago as well. Today, I am happy to announce that OCI cards will now be given to the sixth generation of the Indian diaspora in Trinidad and Tobago. You are not just connected by blood or surname. You are connected by belonging. India looks out you. India welcomes you. And India embraces you.
So we'll reflect on this landmark visit of the Prime Minister to Trinidad and Tobago, a country with which we have a deep-rooted historical and cultural bond, and how this visit further strengthens that bond. I'm delighted to welcome two distinguished guests to share their perspectives and take the conversation forward. Pleased to welcome former Ambassador Anil Wadhwa. Ambassador, delighted to have you with us on this broadcast. We're also joined by Dr. Manish Dabhade, Associate Professor, Center for International Politics, Organization and Disarmament, School of International Studies, JNU. Dr. Dabhade, glad to have you with us on this broadcast as well. In fact, before we begin talking about the Prime Minister's visit to Trinidad Tobago and its significance, let's explore, for the benefit of our viewers, the historical connect that India shares with this Caribbean nation. Dr. Dabhade.
Oh, yes. No, I think it's a very important please understand that this is really the 180th year of the first Indians arriving in Trinidad and Tobago, and this was in 1845. And it's a very, and Trinidad and Tobago was a former British colony, was a British colony then, like India was, and so there is this connect of Indians, and it's a story of exploitation, it's a story of colonialism, and I think that is where shared memories, shared histories. So that is how the roots of the Indian sort of contacts with the Trinidad and Tobago exactly come out of this historical setting.
Ambassador, how has this legacy, we are talking about the historical connect, something that Prime Minister Modi also referred to in his address to the Indian community in Trinidad and Tobago. How has this legacy shaped our diplomatic and cultural relations with this Caribbean nation, and particularly in context of the role that the Indian diaspora has played through the decades in strengthening this bond?
So in Trinidad and Tobago in particular, we've had 143,000, people of Indian origin who were taken as indentured labor. This is a large number, and Trinidad and Tobago is a little distinct in that sense because in other places also there were indentured labor who were taken, but in this particular country, over the years, we find that their numbers were quite large, and the descendants of these indentured labor who are there today, in fact, constitute about 40 to 45% of the total population of Trinidad and Tobago, which is 1.6 million odd. And because of that, they have been able, I would say, because of the unity that they've displayed, to actually come to power. And in fact, we have a unique situation where we have the Prime Minister and the President of the country, both of Indian descent, both Pravasi Saman awardees, and at the same time, both having visited India to look at their roots in the past. So this is a very unique situation in that respect. And in fact, wherever Indian diaspora have gone, we have had strong linkages, strong cultural linkages with those countries because of the traditions that have been passed on from one generation into the other generation. And Prime Minister's gesture, in the clip that you showed just now, of extending the OCI caste to the sixth generation in Trinidad and Tobago is really something which is quite unique.
Ambassador, coming now to the significance of this visit particularly, it's the first at the Prime Ministerial level since 1999. How do you see it adding value to the historical and cultural relationship between India and Trinidad and Tobago?
So look, this visit comes after a very long time, as you mentioned in the opening clips. 1999 to 2025, that's a very long period.
Yes.
In this period, Trinidad and Tobago has emerged as the foremost economy in the Caribbean. The Caribbean itself is now making huge strides, and most importantly, the region is quite rich in natural resources, primarily oil and natural gas, and Trinidad and Tobago in particular has been able to harness the investments from its colonial powers and the others developed countries to actually develop its infrastructure to a point where it can branch off into the other sectors of the economy and make life much better for its population. So therein lies the opportunity for India using Trinidad and Tobago as a gateway into the Caribbean because of the free trade agreement which exists between this country and the rest. And at the same time, also Indian companies now having opportunities in other sectors of the economy for which Trinidad and Tobago is very keen to open up. For example, in the digital technology sector, artificial intelligence, and also in agriculture, machinery, etc. Renewable energy is one other area that they're quite keen to have Indian companies participate in. And of course, the perennial pharmaceutical industry, which is very important for the region.
Okay, Dr. Dabhari, in reference to what the ambassador said about Trinidad and Tobago being a strategic gateway for India into the Caribbean, what are some significant takeaways that you are expecting from this crucial visit of the Prime Minister? And how do you see it also influencing our bilateral ties, in addition to the cultural ties that we enjoy in the areas of trade, technology, also education, health, and several other avenues that the ambassador has referred to?
No, I think there have been extremely interesting sort of win-win solutions for both sides, India and Trinidad and Tobago. First and foremost, I think please remember that Trinidad and Tobago is the first, country in that part of the world where UPI payments have been started last year. So I think that's a very important sort of that shows that it's the first Caribbean state. Number one, number two, in terms of volumes, the trade volumes have seen a significant jump in last many years. For example, in 2021, the bilateral trade was $264 million, and now we're sitting in 25, it is around $340 plus million. Look at the basket of Indian exports and imports. So obviously, as Ambassador Wadhwa pointed out, we are now really looking at the frontier areas of digital technologies, but obviously pharma, there is pharmaceutical is really at the center in many ways, but also vehicles, and vehicle parts and accessories, plastics. And India also imports especially mineral waxes, vitamin substances, mineral fuels and oils. So I think there is a complementarity in that sense between India and Trinidad and Tobago. And I think very importantly, as was pointed out by Ambassador Wadhwa, that India definitely sees Trinidad and Tobago as the gateway to the Caribbean community and common market, the so-called CARICOM group. So I think it's a very important development for us.
And strategically, how do you see it also, this visit of the Prime Minister to the Caribbean evolving, considering that this visit comes at a time when India is expanding its global engagements? And both of you have mentioned this country, as, even though it's a small country, but very rich in natural resources and as a gateway to the Caribbean. So do you see it adding value to our relationship, not just in terms of deepening our historical connect, but also in terms of strategy and in terms of economy?
No, absolutely. Please, all of us need to remember that India is now the fourth largest economy in the world and aiming to be the third largest. So any increase, any expansion in global trade is always welcome in that sort of vision of Prime Minister Modi for Viksit Bharat. So I think let's also keep that, and that is the larger legacy. And please understand the emotional, cultural bonds which we have with the people there, with our own people there, I think are extremely important in getting them to really in terms of remittances, in terms of investments, in terms of medical tourism. I think these are wonderful opportunities for Indian for Indian industry in different sort of domains. So it is really a win-win for India and really powers that Indian sort of growth story. And also, I also look at it in terms of the global South. That to what extent is India, when India is talking about championing of global South, so these are the places, these are the countries where India is raising and taking up the agenda and priorities of development, of cooperation in different forums like the UN, but also G20, very importantly.
Certainly. Since you mentioned Global South, let me get in Master Wadhwa's perspective. This five-nation visit spread across strategic locations in Africa, Latin America and the Caribbean, it does reflect India's strategic intent to strengthen ties with the Global South, Ambassador. But how do you see it signaling India's renewed push for deeper engagement with the Global South?
So if you look at the countries concerned, you have, Namibia, which is at the end of this five-nation visit. In between, you have Argentina and Brazil. Argentina and Brazil, of course, have always been extremely important and close to India in terms of economic engagements.
Right.
But the other three, which is Ghana, Trinidad and Tobago, and Namibia, are, in my view, a little underexploited. And that's because all these countries are rich in natural resources. India has got a twofold, aim with this visit. One, to make sure that the ties with the global south and Africa in particular are strengthened. And secondly, also to look for diversification of natural resources. Most important on top of the list over there would be critical minerals. And we know that these countries have unexplored mines of critical minerals, which need investments, and which need the presence of foreign companies, especially companies from India, because of the strong, political ties that India has had over the years with these countries. So therefore, from the Ghanaian side, when the first leg of the visit started, we had a clear interest of investments in the mining sector, which means that Indian companies have got to go in there and explore possibilities, have a little bit of patience,
Right.
and that will enable India to diversify its resources. In terms of Trinidad and Tobago, this is yet another country which can act as an important source of our energy security because Trinidad and Tobago has a well developed oil and gas sector now. And in terms of imports from Trinidad and Tobago, it will certainly help if there is an actual presence of more Indian oil majors in this country. So that presence on the ground makes all the difference, and there are ways in which they can collaborate much more than before. In all the three countries that I mentioned, leave aside Argentina and Brazil, which we know are quite well entangled into the Indian economy. There is definitely a need of further exploration of Indian companies' presence and exploiting the resources for the benefit of both the sides. And that is the only way to go in the future.
Absolutely. Dr. Dabhare, India has long positioned itself as a voice of the global south, and in several ways we are now seeing how this visit is translating that positioning into actionable diplomacy. How do you see India differentiating its approach when it comes to South-South cooperation from the other global powers? What is it that makes our approach and our engagements with countries which have long been underrepresented? Now we are giving representation to them. We are becoming their voice at global fora. So what is it? What makes India's approach unique?
No, I would be very blunt and very clear that the Indian approach has been extremely important and extremely different in the sense that we are focusing more on capacity building. So I think that is very different from other, and we have seen examples in South Asia. We have seen examples of China, for example, getting countries into a debt trap. So India is coming with a very different approach, and it is really about development partnership. Number one, as I said, it is about capacity building. Another very important feature is that it is completely demand driven. It is not supply driven. So I think that's a critical differentiator between India and China, and that is where I think India is really playing a very smart game to really that make countries understand that it is in their interest, it is to their benefit that they are partnering with India, because our objectives are very clear that it is really about development and cooperation. It is not about entanglements to the detriment of recipient countries.
Absolutely. I think that's an important point that you made about capacity building and shared development priorities that make India's approach unique. Ambassador, so from digital public infrastructure to renewable energy, India has been offering low-cost, scalable models to these countries for development. How central is knowledge and technology transfer to India's engagement with countries in the global south, particularly those that have been underrepresented for decades?
So we've been talking about capacity building, and Dr. Manish already referred to that. I think it's a unique approach that India has followed with regard to Africa and other countries of the global south in other parts of the world, which is not bothering about exploiting resources, but making sure that the countries with whom you deal with are treated as equal partners, and that's a different kind of approach. So therefore, we find that the digital stack that India has developed in India for its huge population, which is actually delivering on the ground today, is a very workable model for the global south. We've seen it work in Africa already. We've seen it work in our neighborhood and also in Southeast Asia, and also in the Pacific Island states. So it is a model that many countries would like to replicate because it ensures that distribution takes place at the ground level at very low cost. And also it plugs the leakages in the system. Most of the countries in the global south are actually in need of technology like this, which they can scale up according to their needs and their requirements, and for which they don't have to invest too much because their resources are scarce. So that's
Absolutely.
number one. Secondly, of course, is the question about reliability and the trust that they would like to have with any country with whom they deal with. In terms of technology transfers, they would certainly like to deal with countries with whom there's a certain amount of trust. In the case of India, that trust already exists because of the political relationship that we've had for such a long period of time. And especially in countries like Trinidad and Tobago, because of the diaspora connection that we have with almost 45% of the population descending from India, obviously the trust level is very, very high. And we could see that in the interaction that Prime Minister had in the meeting with the leadership, the way he was received, and also his address to the community. And I'm sure something similar will happen when he addresses the parliament.
Certainly, you're right. The symbolic gestures, cultural diplomacy, we've seen have featured prominently in this tour of the Prime Minister so far. We saw that in Ghana, we've seen that in Trinidad and Tobago as well. Dr. Dabhare, how does India's soft power strategy appeal to countries in the global south that have similar post-colonial trajectories, and do you see that reflecting now, that respect, that honor to our Prime Minister in the manner that he's received, in the manner that he engages with the leadership in these countries, and the top order, the civilian order that the Prime Minister is bestowed with in several of these countries?
No, absolutely. I think it's a very important strand of Prime Minister's global outreach, where India is seen as a source of, and not literally as a source of democracy, but as a mother of democracy. Its liberal traditions, its pluralist traditions. So I think these are very important facets which really are part of India's soft power. And again, the post-colonial experiences of exploitation of and this whole indentured labor, the Girmitiya legacy. I think those sorts of ties are now, and look at the very sort of emotional responses when Prime Minister Modi is speaking to the joint session of Parliament, when he was given the order. I mean that those order of Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. All these are very emblematic of how India is seen and how the Indian leader is seen by global South, especially global South. And I think please understand that India's G20 presidency was a very transformational moment for countries from the global South, because it was actually that you had the Russia-Ukraine war on, and India really played a very important role in terms of really putting the agenda of the global South back and through the three voices of the global South summits at the center stage of global conversations, that ultimately the world is not Europe, the world is not Americas, it is really about the global South. And I think India really successfully brought global South into the imagination in more ways than one. So I think that has really been, and also look at the COVID times. I mean, India supplied almost 40,000 vaccines to Trinidad and Tobago under the vaccine Maitri scheme. So all those instances were recalled by the Prime Minister in her address also while welcoming Prime Minister. So I think it's a very important part of India's soft power.
In line with the principle that India gave during its G20 presidency, that is about Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, the world is one family. We spoke about inclusive and equitable development. Ambassador, by strengthening with countries in the global south that may not be traditional economic giants, is India building a more inclusive and equitable model of global engagement, something which is in line with our motto of Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam?
It's always been the case as far as India is concerned, and India has always striven to work with countries in the global south Even before other countries woke up to the potential of Africa, Indian traders and companies were in Africa, especially in East Africa. And this is also driven by the fact that a number of people of Indian descent, the Indian diaspora, are present in these countries. So there's this traditional linkage that exists with many of these countries. Even where this does not exist, and I would take the example, for example, of the FIPIC countries, for instance, which a grouping which India formed just to make sure that the linkages with these countries are strengthened, and the fact that India can work with them quite easily. There again, India was offering solutions which were based on their own demands, not imposing any kind of technology or any kind of development assistance which they were not in need of. And that has worked wonderfully because they've actually responded to that in a very positive manner. Similarly, with countries now of the Caribbean, I think India has been a little late in terms of trying to engage with countries in the CARICOM, or for that matter in Latin America. But that era is now started, and I think already for the past few years we've seen a sea change coming about in how India deals with that part of the world. Once again, offering technologies and offering appropriate exports from India, which actually gel with the needs of the local population. And it is here that we see this actually translating into, for example, the appropriate agricultural machinery. In Ghana or in Trinidad and Tobago, they do not need expensive equipment from the West. They actually need something which is workable and which is tried and tested in conditions in India where also similar situations exist. So we are on the right track, I think, and Indian companies should do much more to make sure that their presence is felt in these countries.
Certainly. While we hope that a lot of economic opportunities emerge from this visit, what's also important that the Prime Minister, ahead of his departure, did say that it's a visit aimed at reinforcing India's ties with the global South, and perhaps in reaching out to this part of the world, which is from the shores of the Caribbean to the heart of Africa and Latin America. We are not just re-engaging with our diaspora, we're also diversifying our global partnership, which is very, very important in this increasingly multipolar world. With that, we'll have to wrap up the conversation. Thank you, Ambassador and Dr. Dabhare, for joining us for this engaging and insightful conversation about the important visit of the Prime Minister to Trinidad and Tobago. And in addition, for other countries, we've already discussed about the 5-country tour that the Prime Minister is on. He'll be back on the 10th of July. But for now, we'll have to wrap up the conversation. Thank you once again to both our guests, and thank you very much, viewers, for your time as well.
To watch more programs of Sansad TV, subscribe to our YouTube channel and don't forget to like and share them.